Welcome to Below the Line, where we talk about working in Hollywood from the crew perspective. My name is Skid. I'm a former assistant director and your host.
Quiet on the set.
For the fifth year in a row, Below the Line is talking about the Oscars. Our approach: each episode, I host a panel of film industry professionals to discuss the nominees in their category of expertise. Now, longtime listeners may be wondering, what happened to that DGA episode that normally opens awards season? Well, if you're a fan of that episode is now. We've morphed that conversation into a focus on the Oscar nominees for achievement in directing, but my guests today are that same group of assistant director friends. Now, if you're of the vocal minority that ask, why do you have Shaun O'Banion on that show? He's not even a member of the DGA. Well, you are going to be disappointed because he is back.
Suck it, people. Suck it.
We'll get started with all the guests. First up, Katie Carroll. You're a member of the Directors Guild, currently working as a first AD, and you're a DGA nominee this year for your TV work on Lessons in Chemistry. So congratulations and welcome back.
Thanks so much. I'm hopefully within a week, I'll be able to say a winner, but maybe not. We'll see.
We're crossing our fingers for you, Katie, crossing fingers. Also returning is Bill Hardy, DGA member, first AD, and sometimes producer. Nice to see you again, Bill.
Hey, Skid. Hi, everybody.
Next, Roger Mendoza. You're a DGA member and currently working as a second AD. Welcome.
Hi.
And finally, as hinted, Shaun O'Banion. You're still not a member of the DGA, but you are both a member of the Producers Guild of America and a fellow podcaster. Always glad to have you on the show. Welcome.
Hey, Skid. Thanks for having me. Hello, everybody.
Well, glad to have everybody here. To start, I'll list the 5 films nominated for achievement in directing: Anatomy of a Fall, Killers of the Flower Moon, Oppenheimer, Poor Things, and The Zone of Interest. We're going to discuss them in that order, and spoilers are possible, so consider this awarding. First up, Anatomy of a Fall, directed by Justine Triet.
I haven't seen this one yet. It's high on my list, but I got nothing.
Besides Katie, has everybody else seen this film? All right. Bill hasn't seen this film either.
No, Ed, I'm sorry.
Okay, all right. So, Roger, Shaun.
I enjoyed it.
I've seen it.
I enjoyed it as well. Let's talk a little bit about what we think of the film overall.
Oh, I think it had one of the best arguments in a film that I've ever seen between a couple. That was one of the best directed arguments I've ever seen on film.
Say more. What did you like about it?
That slow burn tension when you're actually in a relationship with someone and you start to argue and that little thing starts building and building and building and I've never seen somebody actually direct something like that. Usually people are just straight up arguing, and it was just such a slow build to it. It felt so realistic in the way that he directed the trajectory of the argument. It made it feel very real to me.
I feel like you're describing why I'm alone in life, Roger.
Yeah, same. I agree. I agree. It was just very well handled. I think all his directing was very well handled. Oh, and the dog was amazing. I hate to say that if there was a role, not to make light of it, but if there was a award for best animal performer, that dog should get it.
The dog is a big part of it as well. And
Dog's a big part of it.
Do what she needed to do.
And she's definitely, in my opinion, she should win best actress. She was phenomenal. I didn't think I would like the film at all. I still you get to the end without giving it away. You still make your own opinion about who murdered, whether she murdered him or not. I guess I gave it away. But which I found very interesting. It didn't really point you in a direction, but it did. But it lets you make your own assumption at the end.
Yeah, I think the ambiguity is intentional. Like on that, at least my
wonderful.
takeaway was like someone asked, "Well, what did I think happened?"
Yeah.
And I'm not sure I'm supposed to think that I know what happened. Just the whole breakdown of the marriage overall is really the story.
Yeah,
Very much so. And it's like at a certain point, it becomes a trial movie, right? Although it's a very interesting trial if you're not from that part of the world, because it's taking place in like 3 different languages at different moments, and everything feels very real. I had the, whether you consider it fortunate or unfortunate, opportunity to sit on a murder trial in a jury at one point in Los Angeles. And it was a lot like it's depicted in the film, which is to say that sometimes you have questions in your head that just don't get answered through the case by either side. And you're sort of like, aren't they going to ask about that? But you don't get to direct the questioning on either side. So you just have to cite like this, okay, this is the information we got, and this is what we base our judgment
The
on.
decision on.
Yeah, your decision on. And it's really fascinating to see that play out. And we're so used to like, Law and Order or something like that, where it's sort of very cut and dried and we know who's who and we know who's the bad guy and we know why it was done. And in real life, it's never like that, or rarely like that. So I thought the film, especially for you guys who haven't watched it yet, it does an amazing job of simply sort of presenting life, and at times almost feels like a documentary style. Not that it's, shaky cam or anything, but you feel like you're spying on stuff. And it's a weird voyeuristic feeling as you're watching, as Roger was saying, this in particular, this fight that you weren't privy to prior to the trial, that you get to see a slice of, and you're just like, wow, okay, I don't know how I feel now. I don't know if she did it, if he did it to himself, it was an accident. Like, I don't know. It's pretty impressive.
It was I think the first like 45 minutes or so, I'm just trying to get into it. And then it just took off. It was, wow, this is an incredible film. This is phenomenal.
It's worth noting, we'll come back again to talk about sort of the films overall that were nominated this year, but this is the only female director nominated.
Surprisingly.
Well, having not seen it, so I can't attest to it. Every time somebody talks about quote unquote a snub, and we'll talk about Barbie and Greta Gerwig, but my argument back is, okay, who would you take away from? And I definitely have my opinions on that, because I think there are people who deserve to be on this list less than Greta Gerwig does. But again, it's all opinion, so it's hard to say. But I'm excited to see this movie now.
Yeah, and again, I don't think spoilers, yes, but I don't think we've given anything away. Next on our list, Killers of the Flower Moon, directed by Martin Scorsese.
This is the one that I think doesn't necessarily need to be on the list.
I am so glad to hear you say that, Katie. I thought I was going to be standing alone again this year.
Here's the thing. I did like it. That doesn't mean it's one of the best movies of the year and or being 10th best or 11th best. It's still a really damn good movie. It's just not necessarily...
Is it though?
On the short list for me.
Okay, we might have a spectrum of opinions on this one. Roger, you enjoyed it, it sounds like. What did you want to say?
I thought it was incredible. That it was the best gangster movie he's made yet. I thought the performances were great. It felt so big to me. It felt so big and so nuanced in a lot of ways because of her performance, and also Leonardo DiCaprio's performance, which I'm not a fan of in particular. Like, I've never really been, Basketball Diaries, I loved him there. But aside from that, I've never, really been a big fan. And I thought this was an amazing performance in playing this fool that's being taken advantage of, that can't get away from his evil uncle, and it's killing his wife, but is still in love with her. It was in every frame, it's just big. It was just it felt like an epic almost to me. Everything that you look at in the background, everything is moving. The street felt alive. There was just so much detail, and it was so vibrant in so many ways that I couldn't stop staring at it. And I didn't want to like it. I'm just not a fan of the long 3.5-hour movies, or it was. I didn't want to get into it, and I ended up really loving the film. There's a scene where they're where all the FBI men come together, and they're all talking about how they've learned different parts of the case at this oil field, and in the background, the house catches fire, right, and the ranch, Hale's ranch catches fire, and you start cutting that with him poisoning his wife and also trying to poison himself. And you can see it all burning down in the background because the house is got a view of the glow of the fires through the window, and it was so indicative of everything that he was going through. And I thought that was brilliant. It was so so well done. And I'm also not a big Scorsese fan, but this movie got me. I thought it was one of his better films.
Well, we're going to come back to because it's funny. The things you like, actually, I have specific problems with. That is, though, 2 movies in a row, Roger, that you started not liking the movie. Do you actually like movies, Roger? Is that always? Is that going to be 5 movies in a row for you?
Lately, I go in to watching the movie not wanting to like it based on my previous experience with the director's previous movie or some movie within his catalog, and I've been pleasantly surprised this year by what I thought would not be good.
I will say, I think it's his best movie in a long while. Best movie overall, that's reaching.
Maybe.
But also,
what do you think is his best movie, Katie?
I mean, between Raging Bull, Taxi Driver, Goodfellas, Casino, I mean,
Casino.
4 that are arguably
I mean, listen to how crazy you are, Roger. Listen to her describe how crazy you are.
I didn't think he had that in him anymore.
But that's it.
I wasn't expecting that at all.
You're surprised that he's gone over the bar that he set over the last 10 years. That doesn't make it great. It just makes it great for him in the last 10 years. It's a sliding scale.
Listen, in fact, so I'm going to go on record then again. I actually think there's a lot of talent at work here. I think in all the other categories where people get nominated, that's fine. Like it's all, production design, et cetera, et cetera. Like there's just good stuff in the movie, but the movie itself is not good. I mean, it's not. The biggest problem I have with this movie is it's not focused properly. Like focusing on Leonardo DiCaprio and Robert and De Niro, those characters, that this movie just gets convoluted all around. And in the end, that's why you end up with this very weird radio show little thing at the end, because the actual ending for those characters is not satisfying in history. They don't they go to jail for a little bit, or and so it's just this sort of, the movie should have been about the Lily Gladstone character.
100% agree.
If it had been focused about her, and I'm not saying, I could have written it better.
Jesse Plemons doing better investigation. Watching that investigation would have been like.
I read that that's where it was supposed to be, right?
Yeah, that's what the novel.
It was supposed to be. Leonardo DiCaprio was supposed to play the FBI investigator.
Yeah,
and then they changed everything so that they could focus on the relationship more so than the investigation.
The movie's not well focused, and then what you end up with is you have a 3.5 hour movie where you still have an exposition scene. Like the FBI still has to get together. That very scene you're talking about, Roger, that's a problem for a movie this long, that everybody has to get together and explain what's going on. And in fact, they start doing flashbacks within flashbacks, like cut, and you're like, well, wait a minute, what is this, before they tried to kill her or after they tried to kill her? And so the whole thing just starts, and again, beautifully shot, right? But it just starts to fall apart. And then you end up on top, then you start to notice things like there's these jump cuts. Like 2 of them jumped out at me when Leonardo and Robert De Niro first sit down, their drinks just hop into their hand. And then also that lovely vista shot where Lily Gladstone and Leonardo DiCaprio are facing each other with the cars. Then it jumps right in that they're face to face. And that feels like they're not getting coverage on the day.
Scorsese abandoned, continuity a long time ago. If you look, I mean, you can, honestly, he and Thelma, if you go back to Gangs of New York, there's shots where like Cameron Diaz, there's a melee going on and Cameron Diaz is like way over on one side, and the next cut she's like right next to somebody else, and you're like, well, wait a minute, what did she morph there? Like, it was continuity. I was watching, I'm like, half the time I'm watching is somebody's arms are crossed and you cut back to them and their arms are down at their sides. I'm like, but in the over, I didn't see. They literally don't care anymore. Scorsese's like, I'm cutting performance. I don't give a shit if the cigarette is the wrong length or the drink is not
bad.
full.
Then it takes you out of the
moving on.
All of it feels like a director that isn't collaborating anymore, and he's got his idea about how it should be and isn't listening to anybody else. And that's, I mean, I'm not saying it's still Scorsese and he's still surrounded by great people and they still spend a bunch of money, and it looks great in places, but he has done better. Not in a while. I don't think I've liked any of his stuff since.
But the other thing is, I mean, obviously, awards, subjective, all that, everything. But at the same time, you know, you do have to sort of take into consideration, although the Academy members often don't, that you are just judging this movie. You're not supposed to judge his catalog that preceded it, which includes arguably better films. You have to just judge this on its own merit as a story. I agree with Roger. I think it's one of the best things Leo's done. And I'm a fan of his, but I do think it was an incredible performance. And then he didn't get an Oscar nomination for it. So you're like, well, okay, I don't know. I like the film. I don't think it needs to be the length it is. I think by the time you get to the trial stuff at the end in the last like 30, 40 minutes, and they start re-explaining things that you watched 2 hours ago, I was like, God help me, don't do this now. We know it. We know it. So don't do this. Skip the trial, whatever. And I really like the score, the late Robbie Robertson. I thought right from the first music cue in the film, you're like, okay, we're in Scorsese land. This is like, I get it. He's operating at you know, top of his field at 81 years old. And yeah, I don't think it's his best. But I also don't think it's at the bottom of his you know, resume.
And one thing I think, like, he constantly works with Robert De Niro and Leonardo DiCaprio, obviously, and they all have a working relationship with each other. Great. I think both De Niro and DiCaprio are miscast in this. They are phenomenal in it, and they probably brought something to it that was phenomenal. I wonder what the movie would have been if it had been two different actors, because they're both too old for the roles. Like, Leonardo DiCaprio comes home and he's like fresh from the battlefield from World War I. His character should be like 25 years old. He's pushing 50.
But like 25-year-olds looked like 50-year-olds back in the 20s.
Oh, back in those days, huh, Roger?
Right. And then, like, at the end, I'm thinking, okay, Robert De Niro's probably too old for this, but okay. And at the end, they say he died when he was 80 in 1947. So he's supposed to be mid to late 50s during all of this, and he can barely go up or down stairs. So
in what Roger probably thinks is his worst gangster film, The Goodfellas, you know, he is
That
playing.
was such a bad film.
De Niro does play a 23-year-old, I think, the first time you see him. When he comes in at the craps table or whatever.
right.
Yeah, I mean, so what Roger was saying earlier was like the original, for anybody who doesn't know, the novel, the
Yes.
book, not a novel, the book, David Grant's book, is about the birth of the FBI and the discovery of what was going on in Oklahoma with the Osage and the investigation that created the FBI and solved what was going on down there. And that was what Scorsese and Eric Roth had written. That was the movie. But then essentially the Osage got word that the book had been purchased and was being adapted. And they basically said, if you tell another wait, save your story about our people, but without our people, we will pick it. We will make a big deal. You guys will be wrecked. And they went back and sort of like reanalyzed the book. And we're like, well, what is it? And DiCaprio, as Roger said, was supposed to play the FBI agent. And DiCaprio was like, well, you tell us, Marty, what's the movie? And Scorsese said, well, it's Ernest and I forget her character name. So that's when they switched it. But I think I forget which one said it, but I feel like she got short shrift. At a certain point, they got, you know, 3/4 in the movie and we're like, well, she just lays in a bed now and she's getting poisoned. So what else can we do with her? So let's just really make it about, you know, De Niro in the jail looking at DiCaprio in the jail, and we'll just do that. And so I was kind of like, boy, you pitched the whole movie, you sold the whole movie on her, on Lily Gladstone and the Osage. And in reality, you didn't quite nail that.
And I feel like there's probably a way to do the formation of the FBI and finding out what's happening in Osage County without making it a white savior. You didn't have to shift the focus to not tell that story. Find a way to rewrite that story, because I thought that would.
I don't think they made him the white savior, though. He was more like
well,
the white
that
devil.
was the point,
So-
that they
so
didn't want to make the FBI agent the white savior for solving this crime. So, okay, let's shift the focus off that story. But then the savior is not the FBI agent. The savior is Lily Gladstone's character for going to DC to say, hey, we need help. You have to help us. You created this problem. Help us solve this problem and involve the county and the Osage members and create that story, as opposed to these other two white guys who are creating the problem in the first place.
I'll give you another example too. There's a moment early on where all of the Osage women are sitting on a blanket and they're at a wedding or a party and they're looking over at Leo and they're talking, oh, he's kind of handsome or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
And in that moment, you, as an audience member, at least for me and my girlfriend, we started asking ourselves, if they knew that these guys wanted their land rights and wanted their money, why would they consent to marry them? Why would they want to? And so you miss that whole thing of character with her that they just never touch. She just marries him and they know they're getting scammed. And you're like, but what's her side of that? What's her reasoning? And it would have been much more interesting to me to see it.
To bring Scorsese's talent and all the, resources that he can command, that would have been a sharper, tighter, more interesting movie overall. And the fact that it fails, I think that falls at Scorsese's feet. Like, I think that the movie we get is because of him, not because, some studio made me work a bad script. That's not the case. It's his movie. And that's why I don't think it should be on this list.
Hard to agree.
Bill, were you going to put it on the list until Roger said that it was the best ever, or where are you falling on this?
I still love it.
The truth is, I was just really happy that I had seen something for this conversation. I mean,
thanks for being here, Bill. Thanks.
Thanks. All right. Good night. See you guys next year. Mostly I was just glad that De Niro wasn't de-aged digitally or anything like that. I mean, like, let's, yes. I think listening to all of your complaints, I'm like, okay, they're right. All right. It started to dawn on me just now that, well, at least it wasn't The Irishman, I think is my overall feelings on it. Like, I completely agree that it could have been Lily Gladstone was the one I cared about. I was fully recognizing the fact that it was drifting with Leo and De Niro, that other guy, De Niro, and it wasn't the movie that I wanted it to be, but I was still okay. I don't know. I feel
no. I mean, I feel the same way. I don't dislike the film.
Exactly.
I used to do this DGA movie nomination podcast, and there I would have said. It's still the AD's dream. It's still like, look, the horse cart. You know how many times that horse cart had to walk by?
Had to be reset.
Yes, exactly. Like, the AD in me definitely gets excited sometimes when I start seeing hundreds of extras and I forget something like, oh, wait, maybe this isn't the best movie. So,
and it was during COVID. They shot it during COVID. I had to interview the supervising location manager who many of you probably worked with, Mike Fantasia. Mm-hmm. And I mean, what they did just to take over that main street that, in Pawhuska, doubling for, I forget the real town. But I mean, my God, it's no wonder the movie cost $200 million. It was astonishing what they did.
There were some really, really amazing, like, camera shots, like walking through the house and really setting the tone, seeing the family in all the different rooms. And I mean, I've said it before, I'll say it again. I'm a sucker for a really good oneer. There are some really good
isn't that
right? Isn't that also part of?
No, it's Prieto, I think,
being the best director, right? Like, being nominated. The scope of the movie was huge, and it was beautiful to look at. I enjoyed the performances. I understand the flaws and you guys made me realize much more than I wanted to care about. But I think overall, I still think it's a wonderful film. I think we all pick apart the things that most audience members won't care about, and I think the things that worked in the movie would be well suited for the average moviegoer, where they would be like, yeah, you had a great performance. Oh, I like the fact that they focus on the villains,
except for the expectation that people are going to be sitting in a theater for 3.5 hours, Roger. Like, that's
true.
Lots of people have not watching this movie for that reason.
No. And to what Shaun said, we don't dislike the movie. I still really like the movie. I just don't think it's necessarily one of the best 10 best movies this year. And finding great moments and great things to appreciate about it, sure, maybe it's the 11th best movie. that doesn't make it on the top list in my mind.
I kind of disliked it, but that's just, you know.
I feel so
and
silly.
And for what it's worth, what we were saying, like what Shaun was saying about Marty and Thelma, like long abandoning continuity, they've also long abandoning actually editing. Like you look at Casino and Goodfellas and Raging Bull and Taxi Driver, they're right around 2.5 hours at most. Somewhere along the lines, they like, oh, I'll hire Thelma, but I won't actually cut anything.
I did reach out to Adam Somner to see if he'd come talk about it. He was the first AD. He didn't write me back. I don't know whether he's busy or just didn't want to talk about it, but yeah.
Well, he's also not, he's not Scorsese's usual first. So there was that sort of Scorsese, because he doesn't often leave New York. I mean, he did for The Aviator and he did for Silence, but he stays close to home. So for him to go to Oklahoma, he had to take, a window of time because of weather and things like that. So he had to take a first that he wasn't used to. He had a new production designer. Actually, when they started that movie, they had an entirely different crew all the way across the board. And then when they decided to pause and rewrite the script, and basically took, I think, 6 or 8 months, I can't remember what Mike Fantasy had told me, but when they came back, everybody was new except for the DP. It was a whole new art department just across the board. And that's pretty wild,
Which makes me wonder how much prep they got in and got into the concept and the tone of what they were trying to do with this new script.
What I was told was the first iteration was, I don't want to say less historically accurate, but more impressionistic of the time. And then once, Jack Fisk, the production designer, came in and people like that, they were like, let's research the shit out of this and let's do the history. Let's make everything not according to what we visually think it might have, but let's make it what it was. And which I really, I mean, Skid, you said it, all the technical categories were top notch across the board.
Well, we're going to move on to the third film on our list, Oppenheimer, directed by Christopher Nolan.
I saw this.
Oh, good, Bill. You should start
Yay.
this off.
Yay, Bill.
This is the one where I feel like this is why I wasn't happy with anybody else's nominations, because, maybe this is nobody else bothered putting out their best work because they knew that Oppenheimer was coming out this year. I kind of feel it from the moment I saw the trailer. I was kind of like, this is going to blow everything else out of the water. And then I saw it and it did. I don't feel like everything else is just our seat fillers this year. I feel like with Oppenheimer, it's phenomenal. It's maybe a little too long when you just look at the time, but
never felt it.
Yeah. I was on the edge of my seat for a dialogue movie. Like there's no giant gimbal sets where everybody's a fight scene in a hallway or anything, it's just people talking. And I was leaning in literally nonstop excited. So I think visually, performance, story, it was all there for me for this one for sure.
I was a little worried, and it was hard as I sat there watching it on IMAX in the big screen, not the screener. So I'm like, that was worth it, 100%. I thought the first hour was a little too exposition-y. It was way too much setup, and the dialogue was too rat-a-tat-tat. It was very David Mamet. It was like, what are we doing here? But once they got to New Mexico, those last 2 hours were so phenomenal. I didn't dislike the first hour as much, and because I could appreciate what the setup was. So the first hour I was a little antsy and a little anxious. I'm like, I don't know if this is going to be as good as I keep hearing it is. And then the last 2 hours are so great that I'm like, okay, I can deal with that. It was really, really well done. I still have a few complaints here and there, but overall, fantastic.
I'm not going. You guys won't like my opinion this time. Thank you. You noticed that I think the first time when I was in high school, I saw Memento, and it blew me away. It was like this guy is amazing. This is amazing. His nonlinear storytelling really got to me, and then continued doing that through all these films. Like my favorite Nolan film is Prestige, and the Prestige, I thought it was wonderful, but it just feels like he took all these like all his nonlinear storytelling skills to a whole new level in this movie, and it just felt so wonderful and big and epic, and the story. I feel like Nolan's characters or film his characters and his films are always about destruction or self-destruction. And what better way to say that we're going to destroy ourselves than, you know, telling a story about the guy that created the nuclear bomb. It was, I don't know, it just grabbed, I was so absorbed and grabbed by it. And this character that's not, when he starts getting questioned and he's in his little trial and he won't stand up for himself. He's just going to let himself be destroyed because he essentially is the person that destroyed the world. So he feels like he deserves it. Then you have what was Robert Downey Jr.'s character's name?
Straws.
Mhm.
And then you have him destroying himself because of his own hubris and trying to destroy this Oppenheimer because of some perceived slight that happened years and years ago. It was, and I didn't see that coming until obviously he gives it to you in the end, and it just left my jaw on the floor. Just I can't say enough about it. It was the best Christopher Nolan movie. I feel that it's the best film he's made. And I don't think anybody wins.
Skid, were you able to watch this movie without running anywhere and blacking out? Speaking of Memento, that was.
Yeah, no, I kept my seat straight through. I was well won. I saw it at an Alamo theater on their big screen, not the IMAX, but they'll bring you food and drink and can pace yourself easily on that. So yeah, no problems for me on this one. When I saw it, I remember I saw it in the theater in August, and at the time I said, "This is the best film I've seen." I hope it's not the best film that I see all year. It turns out it was, but I wasn't as taken by it as, for example, Everything Everywhere All at Once the year before, or Dune. That was my biggest disappointment this year, the strikes. I wanted to hear how Katie thought about the finishing on Dune, since she had such harsh things to say about part one.
I'm sure we'll talk next year.
Next year, yeah, we'll put a pin in that for next year. one presumes, but I think Oppenheimer is great. I think it deserves every award that it's going to win. I wish there was something else that I thought was competing with it. It's Nolan's best work for me as well, I think, but I wasn't that sort of really taken by it, if that makes any sense. And again, maybe it's something about coming out in August versus the stuff at the end of the year and the jockeying for things at the end. That's a decision they make on the marketing side. But I was hoping that there would be more for me this year. And Oppenheimer really kind of peaked out for me early.
Do you feel that because it's so big that other movies on the list that are smaller don't have the same chance to fairly win?
It's a good question, right? Like, again, I don't know. We'll talk more about overall how we think things laid out, but again, fantastic film, no complaints about it. And what all of you guys have said about sort of the culmination of Nolan's work. Like, I feel like he had to make all his other movies to make this movie.
It's a good point. Yes.
The first time I saw it in IMAX 70 millimeter, which was pretty incredible. Like, I mean, as soon as I don't remember if I've ever seen anything in 70 millimeter before. And as soon as it came up, I literally audibly was like, holy fuck. I mean, it was just like extraordinary. On the first viewing, and I've watched it twice now, the thing that threw me off initially was the slipping of time between the black and white sequences and the lead up. So I was a little bit lost. And he obviously, like reveals the Downey Jr., the straws bit at the end, and how Alden Ehrenreich is sort of twisting him up. And I was glad that he sort of made it plain for me, because in that first I was like, where are we? What timeline am I on now? Because I didn't know anything about, what happened in the later years. So it did throw me off, but having watched it again, it's a master stroke of a movie. And everything, the editing, Jennifer Lame's editing, Ludwig Göransson's score, the idea of using like I don't know, all the stuff they were doing. It's just so well put together. It astonished me. And I think you're right, Skid. Like, it's surprising that they dropped it in the summer or toward the end of the summer rather than releasing in September or October, November, somewhere around there as like their big awards play. But I guess they knew. They just like Universal was just like, no, we got it. I mean, this is it. We can put it out anytime and we're going to carry through.
Yeah, it's a big summer blockbuster and also awards. And I think the last time that I can think of that was like Avatar or Titanic. Like, it was a summer blockbuster. Arguably even more so because of Barbie. They helped each other, but without Barbie, it still would have been a summer blockbuster.
Yeah. Yeah. I think what's most astonishing though is like it's just people talking about stuff and talking about science and physics, and you're just like, what, why is this so incredibly compelling? And obviously you have this phenomenal cast. You have Cillian Murphy, who's paid his dues with Nolan for 20 years now. And you have Florence Pugh and Emily Blunt and Downey doing something radically different from, he's so not the cocky Robert Downey Jr. that we're used to. He's not, there's no moment
but
of
also
Tony
he kind of
Stark
sort of is.
He's loose because he's got a physicality. Like,
Yes.
I've worked with Downey, so like I watch the way he walks and I'm like, there's that swishy Downey walk. Those, he kind of throws his legs out. But like, there's a reason he's nominated as well. Like, he
Yes.
transforms. He does something. He like reined himself in, or Nolan reined him in, or whatever. It's really impressive.
Yeah, my only two complaints, which are both small. I mean, one is not small in concept, but is the Emily Blunt and Florence Pugh characters are just so like his mistress, his wife, like bar none, like not really that important, but arguably in his life, they're not important. Like, we just see how they affect him. We don't see them as characters. So I'm willing to kind of put that aside because it's about him and what affects him and how his life is shaped. So if he, as a character, doesn't see them as full people or that on his equal, then that's fine because that's his perspective. And the only other,
but she does get that really.
Yes.
Sorry, not to cut you off. I want to hear the second one, but she does get that moment in that sort of weird sort of trial thing in that tiny room later, where she's the only one who really stands up for him.
Yes.
And I thought that was, if they're going to play her an Oscar scene, it's probably going to be that moment where they're questioning her ties to communism, and she's like, "Fuck you guys! It was 17 years ago." Like, he's going to sit here and be quiet, but I won't. I thought that was pretty great. But what's the second one?
Well, which is apropos of absolutely nothing, but they filmed so much at the Wilshire Ebell Theater here in Los Angeles that every single time I was like, oh, I filmed in that room. I filmed in that room. I filmed in that room. I know that staircase. I filmed there. I filmed there. So for a split second, it took me out of it. But then I'm like, okay, nope, I'm back in. Okay. And that is not his fault because it's a beautiful building.
It is. He's nominated for adapted screenplay too. I don't know if you guys know this, but it's a fun tidbit. The whole script was written in first person.
Really?
So every page is, I walked into the room and took a seat and they looked at me and all that kind of stuff. So it's kind of a trip to read.
That is actually a really fascinating concept. I now want to go re-see the movie with that script concept in mind. It completely changes the way I might see the movie.
What you said, how he would have perceived his wife,
right,
or the other woman, and like that literally is the whole script. It's everything is me, and what I'm doing and what I think and who I like. And
that's who he was. Yeah.
Because this one is a location relevant as opposed to story development. But yes, the Wilshire Ebell, it reminds me of film school when the professor said that we weren't allowed to shoot at the reservoir or the cemetery because every final film had a scene at the reservoir and the cemetery. The Wilshire Ebell is on that list for that's the first thing I think every time I see that staircase in the back of the main room. I'm like, oh,
go back 1 year to the Fablemans and you'll see it about 50 times too.
Yeah. No, it's definitely the period. It's like there are other buildings that have survived the 70 years. In LA, can we go shoot in some of them? But I guess whatever. The holding and the parking is extraordinary.
Yeah, exactly. The parking across the street makes it all worth it. Right? Base camp across the street.
Exactly.
All right, we're going to move on to the fourth film on our list, Poor Things. Directed by Yorgos Lanthimos. Am I pronouncing his name right?
Yorgos
Yorgos.
Lanthimos. Yeah.
That Greek guy.
What do you guys think of Poor Things?
I didn't get the screener until last night.
I watched it this morning on a screen. I thought it's weird, but I like weird because very little is weird. Everything everywhere all at once was weird, and it was cool because it was weird. It's a very weird R-rated version of Barbie. There's so many parallels between it and Barbie. As I watched, I'm like, well, Barbie had that moment. It's a naive woman in a very surrealistic version of, quote, real life, realizing the misogyny around her and fighting for equality. It's they're A and B side of the same record. That's what I got.
Yeah, I can't wait to watch it tonight.
I'm not a huge fan of Lanthimos's other films. I do like The Favorite because it's probably the most down the line, based in some sort of reality that we have a connection to, whereas this is very fanciful. The Frankenstein aspect of this is interesting. I thought Emma Stone's performance is off the charts. This idea of, spoiler for people who don't know, but she's basically a baby's brain transplanted into a grown woman's, but her own mother's body after her mother has passed, and she now has to figure out how to live. And Willem Dafoe is this sort of Dr. Frankenstein that's done this and has all sorts of, pug pigs running around and like just weird stuff. But that's what he does, right? Killing of a Sacred Deer is weird. The Lobster, is it The Lobster?
Yeah,
is
Lobster's
really
one of my
weird.
favorites.
I don't know. For me, I can't connect to a lot of his movies because they're just so outside of anything that I find it hard to like get into it. But I absolutely appreciate every element of it. In terms of a director, you're like, well, there it is, right? This is just his vision. And whatever team he's put together, the production design of wherever it is, I forget, that they go on their trip to, and the boat itself that they go on, and like, it's just all stunning to look at. I still find it a little bit at a distance as I'm watching. I'm like, wow, this is gorgeous. That's amazing.
But is that intentional? Because he used so many wide lenses and super wide lenses almost to keep us at a distance. Even the close-ups looked like they were on a 10 or a 14 or something, and they were abnormally wide for a close-up.
Yeah, but I don't mean like visually at a distance. I mean, yes, that is all true, and he wants you to be a spectator to what Bella Baxter is experiencing and or deciding or feeling. But I just mean it's so fantastical because she's not you know what I mean? Like when you watch a movie or when I watch a movie, I'm like, okay, who do I connect with here? Whose experience am I like, well, I know what that feels like, or I've done that, or I know somebody that's done that, or whatever. And we're usually looking for a way to sort of project ourselves into the narrative somehow and connect to that. And his movies, very often for me, I find that I can't do that because everybody's a little above what we're used to in life. But again, I appreciate every element of it. If that makes sense.
I feel like the way that I felt like that brought me into the film were the men in her life, and how each one of them wanted to control her in some way, and that's how I found my way in. Because at first I'm like, this is crazy, and then I watched it again, and I started realizing that it was the story. The story is about her and her overcoming these men, very much like Barbie.
I mean, even
it's
at the
about
end,
possession.
yeah. And
They
even
all
at the
want-
end,
they
like
all want-
Christopher
Nobody's got
Abbott
the
says,
good
like,
owner.
okay, we can
Her.
talk all we want until we get a gun. And in my mind, I was like, or you could talk all you want until you get a guitar. Like there's so many parallels to Barbie and like men possessing women and women saying, no, I'm going to be my own person. I loved them both. And I thought this one had a director's vision all the way through, as much as Barbie did and as much as Oppenheimer did. That was so clear and so obvious and so cohesive that all the departments worked together with Yorgos's vision, that I really enjoyed that aspect of it all.
Yeah, I thought it was next level stuff for him.
It's the only movie on the list that I watched twice. I had to rewatch it. It was just like no way that he'd actually got away with doing this. This is wonderful.
Yeah. I mean, there's a thing in the movie where at least a couple times Willem Dafoe randomly leans back and burps a bubble up into the air, and it just kind of floats. And it's never, nobody ever goes, "What the fuck are you doing? What, are you okay? Like, what's happening?" It's just a thing that happens in Yorgos's world, and everybody's good with that. I mean, you're just like, well, okay.
This is also a thing that happens that like they're surprised when Willem Dafoe's walking and he's like, well, I took some heroin between the toes for the pain and cocaine because I like it.
Yeah.
What? Sure.
I like when they're in the boat for the first time. They're having dinner with the couple, and she's like the baby's crying. She's like punch the baby. It's just so many memorable lines in this movie.
There are. I actually really, really enjoyed it. I thought it was a really well done and really great movie, and just also fun to watch because of the weirdness.
Agreed.
It's not going to win, but that's okay because of the weirdness.
Well, you know, could win production design, stuff like that.
Yeah. Although no, the vote for Barbie will be for production design and screenplay.
We'll come back around to Barbie.
Yeah.
Teasing the
This game
Barbie
keeps pushing
conversation.
me
But
off.
while we're still talking about the Oscars, our final film on this list is The Zone of Interest, directed by Jonathan Glazer.
Who saw it?
Who has not seen it? Roger and Bill haven't seen it. Okay. Well, I almost didn't see it. I got to admit, when the screeners were out, I just said, oh, it's the Holocaust movie. And I was like, I just don't want to watch a Holocaust movie right now. There's so many things to watch. I'm just really not in the mood. And it wasn't until then the nominations came out, and it's, you know, in sound and here. I said, oh, I need to go see it. And so I went and saw it in the theater and did a little more research. I hadn't realized that Jonathan Glazer was the director when it was just, you know, on the streaming app. And if I had, I probably would have watched it sooner, because Sexy Beast and Under the Skin, right? The science fiction
Birth.
Birth I haven't seen, but the other two, this is only his fourth film. And if I had known that he was doing this, I said, oh, I want to see it. And so, yeah, I saw it in the theater. And it's a really powerful film. He's doing a really good work here.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, like you said, Skid, it's like, oh, it's a Holocaust movie, and we've all seen 1,000 of them, and we should keep watching 1,000 more. There are always more stories, but your first thought is like, oh my God, can I watch this again? And like, yeah, it's finally from the point of view that we've truly, I don't think, ever seen before. And it was fascinating to watch and to see like how often they cut away right at that moment, right at the moment when you might see something like, and it kind of not justified, but explained how some people could have lived through that time, because like they have to put blinders on, they have to do this, and or they choose to put blinders on because it's good for them, because they get furs and jewels out of it and gold, and the production design of the wall just on the other side, and his children's laughter mixing with children's screams, and sometimes you can't tell the difference in the sound. Like, what am I listening to? Am I truly listening to both, or is one drowning out the other? And which one? It messes with your head a little bit, because you are wondering, how are you the family, like dealing with this? How do you do that? How do you live right next door? How is that possible? It was super powerful, and how he played it and worked it out.
Well, also little things like the celebration of a birthday.
Yes.
While on the other side of the wall, people are being shoved into gas chambers. I mean, you're just like, if you think about it, it also shares the same actress as Anatomy of a Fall, Senator Hiller. She's equally impressive in this movie, but for completely different reasons. But there's a thing that is, I'll tell you what I loved and what I struggle with. What I loved was that it is a depiction of the banality of evil, the famous quote, right? You're watching people who are willfully committing themselves to living life as normal and gardening and welcoming the in-laws and having birthday parties, while they know they're killing thousands of people per day, literally on the other side of a wall 20 feet away. What what I didn't love so much was the sort of, when he just goes to the red screen and you just hear the weird Mika Levi score, and I was just kind of like, I don't need that. I'm already with you. I'm in it, and I'm feeling disturbed. And then you do that, and it's like you're trying to poke me more as a filmmaker, and I'm like, I don't need you to poke me. I got you. So there was that. There were some things that he did that I felt were manipulative and unnecessary in a
A
film
hat
that
on a
was
hat, as it
already,
were.
to be, to use the name of his previous film, Under the Skin. He was already under my skin. The whole thing was, I mean, from the very first shot of them just like chilling by the lake, hanging out, having a lovely day in the sun, I was like, oh, this movie's going to really mess me up. And it did.
But also like the very last where the guy is in that hallway and he looks back and you see quote unquote the present and they come back to him. Like that was fascinating. Like for a split second, did he actually see that he's on the wrong side of history for that moment? Or is it just staring off to space?
I mean, I think he was, because right, he was like, he wasn't puking, but he kept spitting like he was sick. And there's a line, not to spoil for people, but there's a line where he's at a party event, a Nazi party event, and he's in an upper level of a room. And as he looks down, he later in that scene, he talks to his wife and says, I'm standing up there and I'm looking down and I'm thinking how much gas would be necessary to kill all the people in this room. But he's looking at Nazi officers, and you're like, she blows past it, like she's more interested in, putting on the lipstick that she found in the mink coat that was clearly taken from the people brought on the train and all these kind of things. And you're just like, my God, these people, to either convince themselves that any of this was acceptable. I won't go off on a tangent, but I have a project about a Nuremberg prosecutor who died last year. And I'm probably going to The Hague in June for his memorial. But among the people that he put on trial, and one of them was responsible for the murder of 30,000 people a day.
Jesus.
He had a double doctorate. This man, he was a double doctorate. There was a mayor, there was an opera singer. These were the commandants. So to watch a movie where you're seeing these clearly educated people just convincing themselves that this is all cool was like viscerally upsetting.
I think to your point, Shaun, I also didn't. There are a couple of things like in like the infrared, what the point of that was, showing the woman at night, and just kind of some of the decisions he made, I'm not entirely clear on. It's not really one of my favorite films of the year. Overall, I thought it was a bit much overall, but to take this material and to present it in such a new way doesn't necessarily surprise me that he's on this list for achievement in direction.
Yeah. I mean, I think if you look at all of the people on this, maybe with the exception of Scorsese, actually, they all made very specific and clear directorial choices, stylistically, visually, auditorially, in terms of their sound design, like we are just talking about, in this one. It's pretty impressive.
All right, well, those are our 5 Oscar-nominated film. Listeners, if that's your only interest, we're done with that now. But before we wrap, let's talk about the differences this year between the DGA nominees and the Oscar nominees in this category. Oppenheimer, Poor Things, and Killers of the Flower Moon are nominated in the Best Director category for both the DGA and the Oscars. But in place of Anatomy of a Fall and The Zone of Interest, the DGA instead nominated Barbie and The Holdovers. So let me hear your thoughts about the rankings for both of these awards.
I think they got it right on Barbie. I absolutely think that was very. I think the Oscars missed the boat with not nominating Greta Gerwig. Whether or not she deserves to win, debatable. I did love Oppenheimer, but Barbie was another movie that had very clear directorial choices that absolutely told the story, that could not have told the story without those choices. Production design, casting, the music, even just getting Ryan Gosling to play Ken. That perfect choice for that. Everything that is right about the movie Barbie was because of Greta Gerwig, and she absolutely should have been nominated in my mind.
I also thought Barbie was a stellar achievement. I mean, that was a tough needle to thread, and she managed to do it in a way that you could take this commercial product and tell the story she told with it. It is to her credit, and I would have liked to see her on the nominated list here as well.
Yeah, I agree.
Agreed.
Or the DGA really doesn't like Sandra Hüller, since the movies that she was in, those are the two that the DGA didn't pick up. I also really liked The Holdovers. Actually, it's one of my favorites of this year. I think Alexander Payne did a great job with that. So,
maybe it's a flashy thing. Like, it's not flashy enough, but that was exactly what I loved about it. I love Alexander Payne, but I find myself always going back to Hal Ashby. And this is a very, like, Harold and Maude is one of my favorite movies. And I kept thinking about Harold and Maude during this. There's no correlation with the story really, but it's more of an art direction thing. But I really loved Paul Giamatti in this. Like, he's the secondary focus, but at the same time, I can't, my eye was constantly drawn to him. And there's a little bit of he looks just like my dad too, but which is kind of weird.
I was more attracted to Divine Joy's performance through the whole film.
Yeah.
That she was exceptional.
Yes, she was amazing too. Like, I like that play aspect, that once you get all the other characters off the stage, there's basically like 3, maybe 4 main characters that you're going to spend the rest of the movie with. Like, I really like that.
Well, there was one moment in The Holdovers I didn't like. And because the movie is so good and so subtle throughout, when he says to him, "Oh yeah, we can go to the cemetery to pay a visit to your dad," I was like, "Oh, that's a little on the nose." Like, I wish they had just gone rather than have to say that out loud, like to draw, because everything else about the movie went without saying it out loud, I thought. And that part really stood out for me. I was like, I wish he'd made a different choice there. But other than that, yeah, it was one of my favorites.
Yeah, I think you're right. It was just so subtle, so just there, but it made it easy to watch. Everything else, you're like gripping your seat or frustrated or annoyed or involved, and just nice to watch. Which
Nice Christmas movie.
Yes.
Yes.
And I thought the young man whose name I don't know, but he's never acted before. Apparently, this is the first thing he's ever done, and I thought he was excellent too.
Yes.
It did make me feel old when I read that he walked. I think I read it on IMDb, but he walked over to the phone, and the crew suddenly realized he had never worked a rotary phone before. He had no idea how it worked. And I was like, "Oh my god!"
I heard somebody talking the other day. They're like, think about how much time has changed. Like, you can't make that movie present day because they can just call an Uber and get in a car and go away. It's wild to think of just that element of it that changes it.
Almost all road trip movies are going to have to be period movies from this point forward. There's the great scene in Harold and Kumar when they go, "Oh, I left my phone back in my room. Oh, forget about it. What could possibly go wrong? Let's go ahead." And I was like, well, they just ruined my entire class. Like, in the age of cell phones, you can't have a good road trip movie anymore.
No, you can break the phone, Bill.
That's good.
You can break it. Throw it out the car window.
I actually saw, and this is a real thing, in a Reddit room on movies, this girl asked the question and she said, "Please don't get mad at me. Please don't downvote me," or whatever. She said, "Were payphones a real thing, or were they just put in movies so that people could like slam the phone down on a corner somewhere?" And I'm old enough to know that they were also. So.
Yes. I'm old enough to remember when they went from a dime to 20 cents. So you just put in a quarter and they just made an extra 5 cents. And that was extra money to them. Yes. Now, Skid, the one other movie I wanted to mention that is not on either list, but frustratingly so, was Spider-Man Across the Universe. That's one. It's on Spider-Verse, excuse me.
We'll see if you voted for Across the Universe. That's why I didn't get enough votes for you.
So it's nominated for Best Animated, and that's the one where as soon as that category got created, animated movies that could have been nominated for Best Picture kind of got relegated, and very few got nominated. if ever again. And it was very frustrating because that movie, in my mind, is truly the best picture this year.
Really?
It was beautiful and phenomenal and heart-wrenching and great and told a great story in 2 hours. Thank you very much.
No, but Katie, that movie ends on a cliffhanger. You hate
I was
that
going to say,
shit.
it's
No,
part
no, no.
one.
Part one was
part
two,
two.
which it was part two of, but that.
Katie, you're my new favorite person.
No, I would have said that about the original, the first one, which I thought was brilliant that year and deserved one. This one, I thought it was actually too much of what made the first one good. I didn't like the second one as much. Truth be told,
I
thought it was a spider.
It
was so did I. It's the Empire Strikes Back of the Spider-Verse movies.
Exactly.
Yeah, it's brilliantly thought out. Everything, all the color motifs, the score should have been nominated. I don't know why the score wasn't
styles of
nominated.
animation,
Definitely
to
the
tell the different
best
stories.
film score. Yes,
beautiful.
And they do that. They do that with the score as well. The score is always part of the storytelling. It always changes with the characters. The color palettes change with the characters. If you pay attention, the color palette in the score will tell you what's going to happen next.
Yes,
it's so brilliantly done. There's such great filmmakers. It's like I loved it so much more than I loved the first. Yes, I should have. I love you,
yes,
Katie. Thank you.
And that's another one, though, because it's voice. You can have someone who's probably too old to play the character, but play the character because the voice adds gravitas to the character without them looking like they're too old. And like, okay, this guy's seen some things or whatever, and then it works that they're too old to play this character.
Well, I'm looking forward to the third one of those. We'll see what they do with it. Other films that people want to draw attention to? I want to call out Past Lives. It's on the list for first-time director for the DGA, and I think that's my second favorite film of the year. Actually, it's just quiet and subtle in a way, even more than The Holdovers. I think Past Lives, people should check that out if they haven't already.
Really nice film. And what's interesting about it in particular is that there's no villain. There's nobody who, there's a husband character who comes in later, and you keep waiting for like, when's the jealousy come? When's he going to just be an asshole? And he doesn't. And you're like, wow.
Yeah.
I've not seen that before.
Yeah, that movie's really well done. And I think, Katie, I think the A24 streamer on that did not expire yet, since you can still vote for it. That you can actually go watch versus all the others that just poof disappeared when the voting closed on the nominees. There was one other another movie on the first-time director list was American Fiction. And this is kind of inside baseball, but I'd like to get your guys' thoughts. There was a lot of churn on like Facebook of DGA people saying that wasn't a DGA movie. Why are we voting for that? And I'm wondering if people think that the guilds and unions should be closed to only members, or is it proper to say, you know what, that was a great film and it wasn't a DGA movie, but he deserves to be nominated for best first time director. Thoughts?
Same thing that happened with Moonlight. Moonlight wasn't a DGA film. They got nominated.
Yeah, you can't really do it with first-time directors. I completely agree in the best director thing, or at least we'll offer you a membership here with your nomination, and if you turn down the nomination, you can turn down the membership, you turn down the nomination too. But first-time directors, it's almost a recruiting thing, honestly.
I think it should probably stay open. Like, again, if a movie's done outside, yeah, I'm all pro-union, but if a movie is done outside and it ends up being best, then we should recognize that.
It's my understanding that sometimes how much money they have to put in for everybody that's a union member, especially DGA, is cost prohibitive. So you got, if you're going to make your movie, sometimes you have to go with non-union crew or people that are willing to make the movie.
I produced 3 features, and there is no way we could have made those movies if we were guild at all. There just isn't. And if you look at our credits, you'll notice there are some guild people who were there under the radar that helped us, because we wouldn't have been able to make the movie without professionals. Quite frankly.
They weren't that far under the radar if they were in the credits.
Well, they may have different titles than they're used to. I'll put it that way. But and it's a certain point. It's not that we didn't want to, because I would rather have just been able to pay them, their rates and give them what they're supposed to get and give them the titles they've earned in other places on other movies. But, at the budgets we were working, you know, my first movie was 150K all in, including post. Second movie was not much over that. Third movie, we had a bit more money, but we had to spend it all on the actors. So we were SAG, we just weren't anything else.
And I just find it
All right,
curious
well-
how many. Oh, sorry, go ahead, Bill.
I was going to say, well, join us next year on Should Shaun O'Banion Join the DGA?
Yes.
I think that they should there should be a I know there are tiers for your budgets in your films, but you should also allow people that want to join an union film to get it done to go there without having to be penalized for having helped somebody complete their film once you're union. You know, like how are you going to get people that know what they're doing or hope that you can, you know, like so many people actually do help, and I speak from experience. I've been on a film and everybody got in trouble.
Yeah, I heard
We
that.
all got in
I heard
trouble.
that Moonlight Crew got fucked, Roger. That's
well,
what the rumor is.
But it was how else was the movie going to be made, right? And I always hoped that they would come up with some other way to be able to help the filmmakers make their films at that point, right? Like where instead of people having to hide or change their names or give themselves different titles.
And my 2 cents is if they're going to be nominated opposite DGA movies that are nominated, if DGA directors like, well, that's not fair. It's like, well, no, it is fair. Make a better movie. You've got the money. You've got the resources. If this movie, which wasn't DGA or wasn't and didn't have all the same resources you did, still created a better movie that was better directed, what's your excuse? Go make a better movie. I got no problem with them being nominated, especially if it means that in the future, if they join the DGA, they get more resources because now they're on the radar of studios, then good for them.
Having worked with enough of these indie people, I would hazard a guess that if any one of these were extended the opportunity, they would jump on that immediately. You know, the entry fee might be a barrier for them, depending on how much they get paid for their little tiny movies. But I would, you know, I don't think there's anybody in this day and age who's like, be part of a collective bargaining. Ah, fuck that. You know, and actually Cord Jefferson, I'm pretty sure he's WGA, right? He wrote on Succession and some other stuff, the director of American Fiction. So he's obviously a union member on one side. I'm guessing he'll join swiftly. I also, just to touch on that movie, have you guys seen it or no?
You haven't seen American Fiction? I saw it.
It was great.
I really liked it. Yeah, it's great.
Yeah, really good. And it's sort of talking about threading a needle again. It's another one of these movies that sort of rides a line of funny but emotional in a very realistic way. And I thought he really accomplished that. There, you know, there's a lot of that is down to that cast, and how great they all are. And they were, well, you know, at least 2 of them were nominated. But yeah, very, very cool movie, very fun.
There was so much chemistry between the cast members in that film. It looked like everybody was having fun.
And Jeffrey Wright, finally. I still haven't seen it, but I'm a fan of Jeffrey Wright from way
Yeah.
back. And he's always brilliant. So to finally get the recognition, I love that.
I'm not that big a fan, Katie, if you haven't even bothered to go see his movie for that. That seems...
I'm gonna see it. I'll see it before the awards. I got a week. I got a week. What can happen?
Yeah, you got a week before the DGA nominations are decided.
Okay, so guys, I do have one question for you. Since you've all worked so closely with directors, the Guild is only still 5 directors, right? For 5 movies, right? But when the Academy expanded to 10 nominees for Best Picture, do you feel like they should have expanded the Best Director category to 10 nominees? Because I always think you can't have the best movie without the Best Director. They touch everything, down to, like, you know, sitting in on a scoring session and saying, you know what, I just don't feel the trumpets. Can we bring the trumpets down? The composers are like, yeah, let's do that. You know, so I know it wouldn't be exciting for like a TV viewing audience because in theory, then the Best Picture wins and the Best Director wins, but maybe you combine it or something. But I just wondered how, you know, working so closely with filmmakers, if you feel like if you nominate 10 movies but only 5 directors, are you leaving off 5 people who controlled everything on that process?
I'm torn because I hear what you're saying and you're 100% right. I wonder if there's a way to do weighted, because like Best Picture is actually up to 10, depending on, it's a voting in a weighted system. So
Right.
sometimes you might have 9
this year, right?
Yeah, 9 this year. And I wonder if there's a way to do the same thing with directors for the same reason, but more weight given, and I don't know how to gauge this, but more weight given if the picture is nominated for Best Picture. Because what drives me nuts is if you have 9 nominees and you have 5 nominees for Best Director, and you have a Best Director nominee, but their movie is not on the Best Picture nominee list, which does occasionally happen. It's like, how is that possible?
Yeah.
How is one of the 9 nominees for Best Picture, the director may or may not be nominated, this director is, but their movie's not? That makes no sense to me, and it's frustrating.
It's people that deny the auteur theory, basically. It's like, we're, as members of the DGA, we've kind of latched onto the auteur theory, where it's the director's movie. So, well, if it's the director's movie, then who are these Best Picture people? And they would be Shaun's. It's
I'm surprised, looking at this Best Picture list, how many of these films don't have the director as a producer on their own film. That's there's a number of them where it's just the producer and the director's not listed. To answer your question, Shaun, I'm a little more cynical about the expansion of more Best Picture, because I think that was more, how do we recognize films that are doing great with only 5 things? We just need to have more. How
do we recognize The Dark Knight this year, guys?
Yeah,
how do we do that?
Exactly. What are we going to do to, because with the 5, you're just not getting a flavor for all the movies that are out there, or even all the movies that represent where the industry is and what's going well in the industry. Yeah, I don't see a need to expand the other categories. I think that would be, it starts to become superfluous. And I don't know, it's probably good that we're fighting for just 5 spots in all of these things, that there can be snubs, right? If you start having 10 of every category, then, I mean, the snubs are part of it as well, I think, for better or worse with the
It's
industry.
an award ceremony, not a participation trophy.
Isn't the Best Picture award more producers award?
It is.
Than
Best Picture is producers,
award? So, right. So it's a little bit different, right? Like it's more so about the people that made that movie possible than.
Yeah, but none of us believe that it's possible. None of us, except for maybe Shaun, thinks it's possible to have a Best Picture without being the Best Director, or at least in competition for Best Director. Roger, you're supposed to be with us on that side.
I mean, that's the auteur theory, right? I mean, if you go
Right.
by the auteur theory, then the Best Picture is made by the Best Director. If you don't subscribe to that, which I actually don't, because I've worked like you guys, and I know that the movie is made by everybody. One of my favorite directors was Sidney Lumet, and he said they shouldn't call me a director; they should call me a selector, because people put things in front of me, and I go, I'll take that one. And I thought that was brilliant. So, I think to say that's an auteur minimizes everyone's contribution, including yours.
I mean, but I would say there are a few directors where I would say that everything that happened in that movie happened because of that man's choices, and regardless of anything else, everything there happened because that guy had a very singular vision. I would say something like Poor Things. I don't think that's the case all the time. I think the majority, and even then, there's so many of us that are involved in making and helping with that, helping that vision come true, translating it so that everybody else understands it and sees it.
And it's also that any given day, the plan can go to shit, and everybody just has to pivot and go, well, what do we do? Okay, how do we, the location fell away, so what do we do with that? And everybody sort of puts their heads together. So to say that anything is under just one person's uniform control is not realistic.
No, but there's also, like, it's the director who probably hired the production designer, the costume designer, the location manager. Other people said, hey, consider this person. And it's the director who finally said, you're my person. You're my department head on this because of the selections you will bring to me. You will bring me things that I hadn't even thought of. And that might spark me to think about 7 other things. So choosing the department heads is part of being the director, where that helps create the film because of the department heads, but you chose them because they brought ideas that you hadn't even thought of.
Yeah, I don't think the auteur theory is the singular force of vision. It's that it guides all of the creative efforts. But what the final product is the result of being guided by one person who in that theory is and should be the director.
Yeah, we're way deep down the film theory rabbit hole right now for those of people that have lost us. Like, it's
you can do this for your class, Bill.
no, it's total. You are complete. Literal doctorates have been written on what we're talking about right now. Like, not respectable doctorates, but there are definitely doctorates that have been written on the auteur theory. I mean, that's the whole. Yes, it's the director. We fully recognize everyone else's contribution, but I always go, and I don't mean it to sound, because Shaun, I think this is one of the things why we don't talk about the auteur theory DGA people in general, is because we don't want to accidentally offend any producer members of the DGA too, because they may hire us further down the road. But it's that if you think about a film like you think about a painting, the painter is, the people that make the paint itself are very important, but they're not the painter. I know that is an oversimplification of the conversation, but because I fully recognize everyone's contributions, it's those moments when shit goes down, when for my own mental health, I go, it's not my fucking movie, man. And I just go and I do it. I do what I was told to do because of the auteur theory. But
I did say to a director on my second movie, though, if you want to be a dictator and only have your ideas up there and nobody else's contribution, then go be a painter, because then you can choose.
There you go. But you also don't have these intentionally have these conversations on a film set for just this reason too.
Yes, not on set. No,
I'm not going to stand there with my pole and go, "This is my movie. You're ruining my movie. Why are you ruining my movie?"
Some have.
Yes,
some have.
We've all
and that
heard
word gets around, and we all know who they are. 100%.
Exactly.
Yep.
Exactly.
Well, now you guys are ruining my podcast. You're like totally going off on the side. This is
Sorry,
my
I took us off on a
podcast, and you guys are ruining it. This was fun as always, guys. On that note, we're going to call it a wrap. Great having everybody.
Yay!
Yay! Thank you, Skid.
Plan on being back next year when we will talk about Dune 2. I can promise that's going to be on the list. That will be our focus.
Yeah.
My favorite film I haven't seen yet.
Probably mine too.
Listeners, I always appreciate your feedback. You'll find my contact info on our website, below the line, one word, .biz. That's B-I-Z. Our Oscar coverage is solid, even if we went off in the weeds a little bit on this episode. So do subscribe to the podcast if you haven't already. Thanks to Curtis Five for our music and John Wan for our logo. The logo is available on t-shirts, mugs, and stickers at redbubble.com. To all of our listeners, I appreciate you. Please rate us wherever you get your podcast and tell your friends. Thanks again from Below the Line.
Fun to see that live.
Nice.
The ending.
What?
The ending, the wrap, it's not a recording that you just like stack on the end.
I like
It's
to
fun to watch
mix
it
it
live.
up. Sean asked me why I do that. And one, I mix it up a little bit every once in a while, meant the Oscars. Two, it gets you guys thinking about the publicity as well and makes the guests have to think, oh, hey, maybe I want to go get a mug or something. Sell some stickers.